Pyotr Nestorov first tasted the war at 15, when the morning auroras turned black with burning hydrogen and torn silk. His village, a string of stilted cottages on the edge of Lake Baikal, was miles below the battlefront. But the skyships that ruled the new century fought at altitudes that could drop wreckage on any roof in Siberia. His father kept him home from school that day to help bury debris that hissed with leftover charge. And Pyotr learned by touch and shovel how ionized air can stay angry long after the guns stop. 7 years later, he leaned over the teak balustrade of the cruiser Irkutsk Star and watched that same charged wind slide beneath the hull like a living river. The Star was a newer design, triple-decked, armored in manganese scales, and fitted with the rail spear array that had become Siberia's answer to the rest of the world's gas bag fleets. 6 retractable spars jutted downward, glimmering with corona where their tungsten points scraped the uppermost sheen of the troposphere. The air up here was thin, hostile, and alive with static. The rail spears harvested that anger, dragged it up along silvered grooves, and fed it into capacitors the size of freight cars. To Pyotr, the technology was half miracle, half sacrilege. His official rating was Navigator Third Class, but everyone in the mess knew he'd spent the nights of his childhood dismantling scavenged wreckage and diagramming alternators on birch bark. Captain Drozdev's shot, scar-faced and fond of quoting poets, mid-maneuver had decided a boy who loved machines that much deserved a chance in her fleet. So Pyotr wore the white and gray of the Siberian Sky Guard, carried his sextant and his slide rule, and tried hard not to look too exhilarated when thunder rattled the hull. Cloud War Year 5 had taught both sides that collisions of gas and voltage could remake the horizon in minutes. The Atlantic Confederation favored slow, graceful zeppelins with fluted fins and brass-rimmed windows. The Russians, by contrast, flew ironclad whales bristling with claws. But nobody's doctrine survived contact with the rail spear. One broadside, one perfect hit, and the charged breath of the sky itself rushed through a pierced envelope like a summoned demon. Hydrogen turned to flame, helium to shrieking exhaust, silk to confetti. Zeppelin captains started painting saints on their gas cells. They also started hiring mercenary kite sailors to cut spear lines before they drew too much air. Most survived long enough to cash one paycheck. The Star had been hunting an Atlantic convoy for 3 days, dogging it across the pole by triangulating radio whispers. Tonight, if Pyotr's calculations were right, they'd cross wakes in the labyrinthine currents that roiled between 80 and 90,000 feet. Rozeva ordered running lights dark, all brass polished and covered, and galley stoves banked low. The night sky outside was rich with stars and the green lace of aurora. The rail spears glowed faintly blue, each a lightning rod awaiting its crown. Pyotr bent again over his map table, drawing wind vectors he could not see. Up here, compasses jittered uselessly, and radar was a newborn science. One listened to metal creak, felt the tilt in one's marrow, and believed the numbers. The convoy rode a current 10 knots above their own. To meet them, the Star would need to climb quickly, burst fire the hydrogen jets, lighten the ballast, trim the elevators, and then settle into a near stall so the spears could latch. Simple on paper, murderous in practice. Too much ascent, and they'd overshoot. Too little, and the enemy would steam past unmolested. At 2200 hours, Drozdeva summoned her bridge crew. The wardroom smelled of whale oil and cedar. The captain spread Pyotr's new calculations on the plotting desk and tapped the crosshairs, her fingernail clicking. "Your faith in the northeasterly shear had better be justified, Nestorov," she said. "I won't have us chasing ghosts in the stratosphere." "It's no ghost, Captain. The shear's stable. But we'll only get one clean overlap." "And if you're wrong," Pyotr swallowed, "then they'll be above us, with the sunset at their backs, and we'll be the ones praying our gas cells are flame-proof." The captain's grin showed a golden tooth. "Excellent motivation, then. Sound general quarters." Sirens howled. Men and women scurried up ladders, buckled harnesses, cinched electroglobes. In the lower hall, the spear crews unlocked the safeties that kept the tungsten spikes retracted during comm flight. Pyotr clipped his sextant to his belt, pulled on a fur-lined flight cap, and reported to the starboard chart alcove. The deck vibration changed. Hydrogen jets roared for 10 count, then hissed to silence as the ballast tanks jettisoned their steam. The massive ship lifted its snout to the stars. From the gunnery bay, Chief Engineer Galina shouted over the comm tube, "Capacitors at 60%, charging pattern violet. 10 more minutes and we glow like a czar's crown, Captain. Keep us shy of 90, Drostava ordered. "I want headroom for surprises." "Aye, ma'am. And if the surprise is a British long gun tearing off our flank, then we'll surprise them back with a spear through their stomach." Pyotr felt the hull pitch gently. Ooh, gentle? No. The altimeter showed steady climb. Outside the deck windows, frost crystals streaked like comets. Somewhere above, Atlantic lookouts would be peering into night, seeing only blank sky, where a predator cloaked itself in darkness and silence. The first contact came as a tremor in the brass barometer. Pressure dropped a hair, then steadied. Pyotr checked the starboard telltale. A glimmer of silver on black, the reflection of something large, not distant enough to be moonlit cloud. He breathed an oath. Bridge unknown bearing 9 degrees high. Range 3 cables enclosing. Drozdeva wheeled to navigation. Confirmation? Radioman Kirsanov pressed headphones to his ear. Intermittent chatter. Atlantic call signs. Estimate group Charlie 8. Convoy confirmed, the captain said. Helm, trim 30 up. Spear crew stand by. The star thrust higher. The invisible sheer Pyotr had gambled upon seized them. Suddenly the deck leveled, though. Elevators remained pinned. They'd entered a river of air that ran opposite to the one below, like 2 oceans atop each other. Against that current, the convoy seemed to drift backward. Shapes resolved. 3 gleaming zeppelins, each longer than a cathedral. Dorsals braced with gold filigree frameworks. They shone with artifice. Pyotr almost pitied the engineers who'd poured luxury into platforms about to die by Rust Belt savagery. "Signal to flee. Where's the rest of them?" the captain muttered. The Skyguard rarely hunted alone, but coordination was ragged these days. Kremlin strategists believed cloud war required fluid packs, not disciplined lines. Tonight the star was hunter and fleet all in one. "Range 2 cables," Pyotr called. "Optimal latch in 40 seconds. Starboard spear pods angled 18 degrees. Below his boots, metallic thumps echoed as the spear locks disengaged. Dick's tungsten tips pivoted outward, extension like the claws of some celestial crab. They sparked faintly where they fissured the troposphere's chill. The whole hull vibrated with eager ions. The Atlantic escort spotted them at last. Searchlights snapped on, painting swaths of brilliance. Pyotr winced. Night vision overloaded to white. A hiss of Morse danced across the wireless challenge, demand for identification. Drozdeva snapped the receiver switch to ground, denying them the courtesy of an answer. The enemy captain's next response was more direct. 2 broad flashes, bright as miniature suns. Chemical charges, thrown purposely into their own slipstream, ignited and blossomed. The concussion slapped the star sideways. Windows spiderwebbed. Somewhere aft, a siren moaned, as ballast valves slammed shut to keep them from rolling. Drosteva braced against the chart desk. "Damage?" "Outer fins scorched," Galina reported. "Integrity holds." The captain smiled, thin and deadly. "Return compliment. Bring us to mating distance." Atlantic zeppelins began turning, a slow parade wheel to present their broadsides. They carried swivel guns and rocket-driven harpoons fearsome against wood or silk. Less so against iron plates hammered in the mills of Irkutsk. Still, every second counted. Pyotr saw the nearest enemy, painted cerulean, christened Alecto, bleeding hydrogen from her pressure valves to lighten and climb above engagement distance. Smart, but too late. "Helm," Pyotr said through gritted teeth. "Adjust yaw 4 left, range 1 cable, now." "On your word, navigator." Fire spears. 6 tungsten rails shot outward on explosive bolts. They trailed braided conduit wire, copper-silver alloy flexing in the sudden drag. The spears bit cloud, then pierced silk. Pyotr felt a punch in the soles of his boots as cables went taut, and the errant charge began its journey upward. Ionized air metal, angry, stolen from the edge of space, roared along the rails like water sluicing through canyon flumes. The star's capacitors belched their hoarded fury into the stream, multiplying it to a coherent torrent. Pyotr imagined it as a dragon's breath pouring straight into Alecto's heart. The enemy's envelope flashed dazzling violet. Arc lightning skipped from nose to tail. For a beat, it looked beautiful. A stained glass cathedral lit for midnight mass. Then the gas bags simply shredded. Hot hydrogen kissed free oxygen, and sound vanished behind luminous overpressure. Alecto blossomed into orange fire that sputtered, choked, and gusted apart, like dandelion fluff. Applause erupted across the deck. 1 spearline fell slack, destroyed in the explosion. 5 remained, still embedded in wreckage. Crew winches reeled them in, tungsten tips smoking. Pyotr noted the time and the kill symbol in his log with a thrill and a shiver of remorse. The convoy's second ship, Charybdis, swung wide, hoping to outrun. Her captain fired rockets, sleek javelins tipped with carbide impactors. But the angles were wrong. Explosions peppered the star's armored flank and ricocheted off to die in empty air. Meanwhile, Drozdoviva ordered a half-turn to bring the portside rails to bear. Navigator, second vector. Pyotr's slide rule clicked. We'll have lateral drift, recommend offset shot. 3-second stagger to adjust for cable recoil. Do it. Again the bolts detonated. 3 spears this time, sold high like a gambler's toss. The first missed, cutting mere cloth. But the second chewed deep. Before the third could land, Charybdis vented super-cold helium through emergency slits, cloaking herself in frost that flashed the incoming stream to steam. The spear's wire recoiled, fusing. A coil of molten copper hurled back into the star's prow and showered sparks across the deck. Cheap Galena cursed over the comm. Main capacitor shell cracked. I need 20 seconds to cage the feed, or it'll arc through our own keel. Navigator? Hold course, Pyotr answered, though his chest pounded. She can't outrun us with discipline, Captain, but if we lose our cage, we fry. Engineering, you have 15, Drozdoviva said, then toggled open the voice pipe. Gunners, manual rail mode. Fuse 3 shells high. We'll finish her the old way. Pyotr helped Kirsanov crank the emergency turret. Manual railguns, scaled-down versions of the spear but firing solid iron flechettes, were short-range brutality. They charged quick, expelled slugs faster than sound, and left barrel linings ruined after a dozen shots. But they didn't rely on cables or atmosphere sap. Range closed to half a cable. Charybdis rolled, trying to bring her ventral keel guns to bear. Too slow. 3 railgun bursts hammered her ribs. The flechettes ripped through hull timbers, machinery, lungs, hearts. A final slug tore a primary ballast cell, and helium hissed free like a screamed curse. The ship began to sink, stately and sad, its prow dipping into the darker clouds below. But Convoy Ship 3, Styx, exploited the distraction. She surged inside the star's perimeter, near enough that her boarding kites could leap. Fabric wings unfolded from her lateral bays. Half a dozen shapes in black rubber suits and copper coils dove into the night. They slapped onto the star's armor, magnetic clamps fusing on contact. Each carried a bundle of wires and jars, Aegean diffusers designed to neutralize the electric reservoir that made the Siberian ship lethal. "All hands repel boarders!" boomed the bosun's whistle. Pyotr swore and grabbed a Selevanov pistol from the emergency rack. The sidearm fired pellet charges, little spheres of conductive resin that, on contact with a metallic surface, bloomed into patchwork short circuits. But first, you had to hit a moving man in black against black. He bounded to the railing. A boarder crawled along the starboard fin, prying at rivets to plant his diffuser jar. Pyotr lined up and fired. 2 pellets sparked off iron, missing. The third caught the man under the armpit. Instantly, blue fire raced across his suit, grounding itself in his own magnet clamp. The man jerked rigid, then slipped away, tumbling into cloud. Another landed on the observation deck, saw Pyotr, and drew a saber edge with discharger wire. They collided. Steel met resin both sparked. Pyotr ducked a slash that severed a signal halyard. He rose inside the man's guard and drove his elbow to the mask. Glass cracked, the boarder staggered. Pyotr's 4th pellet at near point blank stitched a branch of lightning that sent the intruder spasm dancing over the rail. All this occurred in heartbeats, yet one jar made it to the spear housing. A boarder wedged it between actuator gears and smashed the trigger. Fizzing blue fog belched, a microstorm of negative ions sucking charge away from the main feed. The rail spears dimmed, capacitors bled. "Engineering, we're leaking!" Pyotr yelled into the tube. Galina snarled back, "I can't plug both holes. Cage plate's still cracked. Give me a minute, or we're ghosts." Drozdeva's boots hammered up the ladder. She carried a cavalry carbine and the expression of St. Olga on her icon, day's serene slaughter. "Navigator, if we lose charge, the devil will hold our keel down. Ideas?" "We still have hydrogen jets," Pyotr said. "We ram into Styx, right through her. Short the spear lines across our bow. Burst full charge in 1 pulse. It'll arc on contact. Turn their hydrogen into a sun." The captain winked. Approval and damnation together. "Helm, ahead flank. Engineering, dump every joule left when I count 3. The Star lurched, his engines burned hot. Pyotr gripped rail stanchion. Styx filled the window, broad silver flank ornamented with the Atlantic Eagle. Crewmen on her deck waved semaphore in panic. Distance closed, 400 yards. 3, 2, 1. Drozdeva counted, voice a cathedral bell. 2, 3. Galina threw the breaker. Energy not tamed, not civilized, howled along copper bones. The bow spears, half retracted but still hungry, erupted with arcs that clawed space itself. The instant the Star's prow kissed the Styx's envelope, that arc found a waist-high seam in the silk. Hydrogen met lightning in a lover's gasp. The ensuing explosion wrenched both vessels apart, as if by titanic fist. Pyotr's teeth cracked together. Blind light devoured the sky. When vision returned, Styx was a necklace of molten girders, pieces tumbling earthward, trailing smoke like comet tails. The Star spun, hull plating flayed but still held shape. Fires flickered along the forecastle. Men and women groaned in the tangle of ropes. Pyotr pulled himself upright amid embers. Altitude gauge spun downward. They were bleeding lift. Drozdeva coughed, wiped blood from her eyebrow, and yelled for reports. Galina answered, voice ragged. "Main cell punctured. Secondary at half pressure. We can limp, not climb." "Helm, turn us home," the captain ordered. "Navigator, path?" Pyotr looked east where dawn bruised the horizon. Magnetic headings were worthless. The rail spear's last exhalation had scrambled their compass worse than ever, but he recognized a star pattern, low on the south, Sirius flirting with Orion's knee. Home lay under those lights. "Course 139, he said. "Ride the descending sheer will make Irkutsk by midday, if the hull stays. Then set it," Drozdeva said, collapsing to sit on a coil of spent cable. "Tell the commissars we bagged 3 fat ladies and brought their jewels home in our teeth." The Star banked, carving through sunrise. Peter limped along the deck, helping right overturned guns, covering jagged holes with tarps, fetching morphine. Each survivor wore a face illuminated by awe and terror. They had glimpsed the naked heart of the cloud gods and survived. When repair triage slowed, Peter found a quiet corner under a scalded bulkhead and opened his logbook. He wrote, 300 hours. Convoy destroyed. Hydrogen suns birthed. Skyship wounded. Rail spears proved decisive once more, but the price grows. How many more times before the sky exacts its due? His hands trembled, not from fear, there was always fear, but from the electric itch still dancing in his blood. Each battle rewrote the crew, made them more than mortal for a span of seconds, then dropped them back to shivering flesh that must reckon with the damage. He wondered if this was what priests felt when the icon lamp sputtered out and left them suddenly ordinary. A footstep. Captain Trozdeva leaned beside him, sharing the metal wall for support. "You navigated well, Pyotr. Your gamble with the shear won us the night." "I gambled lives, Captain." "As do we all, every sunrise until the treaties are inked." She glanced upward, where torn plates framed sky. "But I was wrong about ghosts. The wind you tracked was no haunting. It was an arrow, exactly where you drew it. Remember that next time doubt claws you." He closed the log. "There'll be a next time? The war isn't done?" She smiled ruefully. "And I'd hate to break in another navigator. Too much paperwork." They watched the thinning aurora together. Far below, the world slept, or perhaps already read bulletins of distant victories they'd never witness. Up here, the upper atmosphere still crackled, rails scraping secrets from the edge of space. The star limped home, a wounded hunter dragging lightning in her wake, and Pyotr Nestorov, boy who once buried shattered engines in Baikal's soil, resolved that if the sky demanded more stories written in blue fire, he would be there to chart the sentences, even if each letter burned the paper of his soul. He tucked the log under his coat, feeling its weight against his heart, and returned to the deck to guide them through the breaking dawn.